Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we will be discussing the AS00SCM remote I/O module for the AS200 and AS300 series PLC. In this video we will be discussing the hardware, connections, configurations and the software required to get started. Firstly, you'll need the AS00SCM communication module. For this module you have a few different communication cards available that just slot into place. In this example we will be using the AS-FCOPM CAN open card. This card works only in a linear topology. The module uses the same I/O modules used as on the AS series PLC, so buying I/O modules is very simple. When installing the AS-FCOPM card, it is important to note that it only works in the card 2 slot of the AS00SCM module. On the communication card is an onboard termination switch. This will need to be switched on only for the last node in the network. The communication card uses RJ45 ports for communication, but has to be connected on the CAN open terminals of the PLC. It cannot be connected on the PLC RJ45 port. When connecting to the CAN open port, the connections are as follow: CAN positive, CAN negative, and ground, which on my network cable is CAN positive, orange and white, CAN negative, orange, and ground, green and white. The CAN open port has a built-in termination resistor on the CPU side and can be connected by connecting a breach wire to the pins showing the 120 ohm resistor. On the AS00SCM module, there are 4 rotary knobs and a selector switch available for configuration. The selector switch is to declare if the module is used as a communication module connected to the right side of the CPU or as a remote communication module. In this example we will be using it as a remote communication module, so you can switch it to RTU. ID1 and format 1 will be left as 0. We will not be using these settings in the RTU application. ID2 declares the node number in the network starting from 1 for the first node from the CPU connected in series. Format 2 declares the baud rate used in our remote communication module. Firstly, we'll need to connect to the AS228R PLC used in this example. For this, we'll use a USB cable and configure the connection in COM Manager. To do this, we will open COM Manager, select Add and give our driver a name. I will name it AS228R. After naming it, we will select our communication method as USB Virtual COM and make sure our PLC is picked up on a COM port. Then click OK, make sure the driver says OK and start, then you can close the communication manager. Secondly, we'll need to open ISP Soft, Delta's programming software. We will create a new project and declare the PLC used as AS228R. Once our new project has been created, switch the communication to the driver we just created in COM Manager. Then open Hardware Config to configure our remote I/O connection. In Hardware Config, we will set our CAN open working mode by right-clicking on the CPU. We will set the working mode as AS Remote Communication and select the amount of remote I/O modules. In this example, we will only use 1. After selecting the amount of nodes in the network, we will configure our node numbers on the modules by changing ID2 to the correct number. For our example, I will switch the first module's ID2 to number 1. When double-clicking on the CPU and selecting the CAN open communication settings, we can see the last few settings that we will need to configure. Feel free to look through these settings, but for now we'll only select the correct baud rate. Considering our cable is only a few centimeters in this example, I can choose the shortest length versus the fastest baud rate. We will select 1 million bytes per second. After selecting the baud rate in Hardware Config, we will have to configure the baud rate on the RTU module by changing format 2 to the matching baud rate as per shown table. I will now change format 2 to setting 7. At this point in time, we are done setting everything up hardware-wise. With this module, it is important to do a power cycle, switching off the power and switching it back on, every time we do a physical hardware change, as the hardware and knob settings are only detected at module startup. Since we have a brand new system, we will do a power cycle just to be safe. When powering on, you should see that the CAN light on the CPU and the CAR2 light on the remote module is off. This means that we do not have communication yet. After doing your rotary knob settings and your configurations in the hardware config, it is now time to download to the CPU to enable the CAN open communication. After doing a power cycle, you should now see the CAN light on the CPU turn on. At this point in time, we are done setting everything up hardware-wise. After the power cycle, we can give the PLC and RTU module a few seconds to boot correctly. Then we can do a system scan to detect all your installed hardware. If your hardware, connections and configuration was done correctly, you should see your RTU module and your installed I/O modules after the scan is finished. When you see your modules displayed correctly, you can download the configurations to your CPU. After downloading, you can do another power cycle, and you should see the CAN light on the CPU and the CAR2 light on the RTU module flickering. If this happens, then you have successfully configured your RTU module, and you can now start programming. When selecting an I/O module, you can see the I/O numbers on the right side of your hardware config. These numbers are what will be used to program. If we want to add a module, we can simply plug it in, power cycle the remote module and PLC, do a system scan and download the configuration to the PLC. To display the correct operation of the RTU module, we will write our correct output number using the system memory SM407, which is a 1-second internal pulse for the PLC. After downloading our program to the PLC, we should see that the first output on the remote module flashes at 1 Hz. You are now done. Please keep in mind that there is not a max amount of I/O modules that you can connect on the RTU module. You will, however, need to keep in mind that the CPU can only control 32 modules. So your total number of modules connected to your CPU and your network of RTUs cannot exceed 32 modules. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and that you now have a clear understanding of how to set up, configure the AS-FCOPM communication card with the AS00SCM remote communication module. Feel free to subscribe, like and share this video.